Hi, my name is Ryan, and today we're going to learn how to read music. How much do you know? If this is your first time reading music, then maybe the novice lesson is better for you. However, if you know a bit already, then carry on. This is for you. So what did we learn before? Well, we looked at time signatures, we looked at note values, and we looked a bit at notation. The time signatures we looked at were common time 4/4, march time 2/4, and waltz time 3/4. The note values we looked at were the semibreve, the minim, the crotchet, and the quaver. And within notation, we looked at the spaces F, A, C, and E, and also the lines E, G, B, D, and F. But now, prepare your ears for a very quick test. Can you hear the time signature being played? Is it 2/4, 3/4, or 4/4? If you said 3/4, well done. Now, what do we want to learn from this lesson? Our goal is to understand some more advanced concepts of reading music. We're going to do this by discussing more complex note values, by building on our understanding of notation, and then by discussing 4 types of musical rest. Now let's start with what other note values can we learn. There is the semiquaver, the demi-semiquaver, and the use of the dot. Starting with the semiquaver. This is how it looks. And you might be thinking to yourself that this looks like a quaver, except it has 2 tails, and that's correct. But how long does it last? Well, semi means a half. Therefore, a semiquaver is half of a quaver. Now, if a quaver is worth half of a beat, then a semiquaver is worth a quarter of a beat. And what about the demi-semiquaver? If you're feeling like this, don't worry, it does get better. This is a demi-semiquaver. And now you might be thinking to yourself, this looks like a semiquaver. Except it has 3 tails. And again, this is correct. But how long does it last? Well, demi also means half. And so, a demi-semiquaver is half of a semiquaver. If a semiquaver is worth a quarter of a beat, then a demi-semiquaver must be worth an eighth of a beat. So let's now look at the dot in music. A dot can come after any note, and it represents half the value of the note preceding it. The easiest way to make sense of this is to try some examples, and we will start with the dotted crotchet. This is how it looks. So the crotchet is worth 1 beat. This means that the dot is worth half a beat. Therefore, the dotted crotchet is worth 1.5 beats. Next, let's look at the dotted minim. It looks like this. The minim is worth 2 beats. So in this case, the dot is worth 1 beat. Therefore, the dotted minim is worth 3 beats. And finally, the dotted quaver. It looks like this. And the quaver is worth half a beat. So here the dot must be worth a quarter of a beat. So the dotted quaver is worth 3/4 of a beat. Now let's try some problems. How many quavers are in a dotted minim? 6. How many demi-semiquavers are in a dotted quaver? The answer again is 6. How many semiquavers are in a dotted crotchet? Once again, the answer is 6. Does this make sense? If so, great. Let's move on. Now we're going to talk about notation. And we want to build on our understanding of notation. And we're going to do this by looking at tones and semitones, and then looking at sharps and flats. So let's start with the tone. A tone is when the distance between two notes is equal to 1, and it is made up of two semitones. A semitone is when the distance between two notes is equal to a half, and it is the smallest note interval in Western music. To visualise this, let's look at this piano keyboard and look at the notes C and D. We can see the black note between them, which is an example of a half step, and is therefore a semitone. This is another example of a semitone. This means that the distance between C and D must be a tone. Equally, between G and A is also a tone. How do they sound? This is an example of a tone. And this is an example of a semitone. Now that we understand tones and semitones, we can talk about sharps and flats. The sharp is represented by this symbol, and it tells us to go up a semitone. The symbol for a flat looks like this, and it tells us to go down a semitone. To visualise this, let's turn again to the piano keyboard. Look at the note C. If we want to sharpen C, we go up a semitone to C sharp. If we want to flatten G, we go down a semitone to G flat. Equally, if we wanted to sharpen F, we would go up a semitone, and this black note would then be called F sharp. But we want to learn how to read music, not play the piano, so how do they look in the music? Well, we can come at the start of the line, after the treble clef, like this. This is an example of an F sharp, and tells us that every F in that line should be sharpened. Here is another example, showing an F sharp and a C sharp. Our third example shows a flat. This is B flat. And the fourth example shows B flat and E flat. Now sharps and flats can also come before a note throughout the music, like this, showing that this F alone is sharpened. This example shows that this B alone is flattened. Now how do these sound? This is an example of a sharp. We're going up a semitone. This is an example of a flat, going down a semitone. So let's recap. What have we covered so far? We've looked at note values, and we've looked at notation. The note values that we've looked at are the semiquaver, the demi-semiquaver, and the use of the dot. The notation we've looked at were flats, sharps, tones, and semitones. Take 30 seconds now to look at these things and remember as much as you can. Now we're going to look at musical rests. A rest is a pause in the music with the absence of a note. And today we're going to look at 4 types of musical rests, and they have the same names as their note counterparts. So we have the semi-brief rest, the minim rest, the crotchet rest, and the quaver rest. And we're going to start by looking at the semi-brief rest. It looks like this. You can see that it is a box hanging from the 4th line, and this is easy to remember because it is worth 4 beats. Therefore we pause for 4. Next is the minim rest. It looks like the semi-brief rest, except it sits on the 3rd line. Like the minim, it's worth 2 beats, so we pause for 2. Third is the crotchet rest, and it looks like a squiggly line, and like the crotchet, it's worth 1 beat, so we pause for 1. And fourth is the quaver rest, which looks like this, and like the quaver, it's worth half a beat, so we pause for a half. Now, let's clap. Below is a strip of music, and I want us to clap this together. It's not easy, so don't worry if you don't get it first time. We're going to start after 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. The next one is even more complicated and is probably more intermediate in level. So if you don't get this, don't worry, these things do take practice. But let's give it a go, and again, we will start after 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. If you were able to get those correct, then well done. But again, if you struggled, don't worry. So, what should we know now? We should have a greater knowledge of note values, including the semiquaver, demi-semiquaver, and the dot. We should have a greater knowledge of notation, including sharps and flats. And we should have developed an understanding of musical rests. Now, let's try and put all of these things together. Below is a short piece of music. It has multiple note values and musical rests. You should be able to understand all of these note values, note if there are any sharps or flats and what these mean, and also interpret the value of the musical rests. If you're able to do these things, then you have met the goal of being able to understand more advanced concepts in reading music. If you feel you need a recap on the basics, take a look at the novice lesson. But if you think you understand, then move on to the intermediate lesson to further your knowledge on how to read music.